Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, and we've created a platform for athletes and other alumni to network and connect within their affinity groups. And this show is all about working with athletes transitioning out of sports. It's a major issue today from a mental health situation, financial literacy. And what we do is we interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey and transition out of sports, ultimately into entrepreneurship, business leadership. And we're so excited today to have Walter Sabrin on. How you doing, Walter?
Hey, good, Rob. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the time and the platform.
It's a pleasure. So Walter's background, he played college tennis at St. John's University in New York. And then when he was done playing tennis, he kind of tried to get on the professional circuit, ultimately started a tennis academy, had a lot of success there, and then moved down to South Florida, where he's at now. And he got into a career of sales and recruiting. And ultimately today, he is the CTO of Vensure, a large major company. We'll talk more about that later. So Walter, talk a little bit about when you were growing up. How did sports shape you leading up into college?
Yeah, so great question, Rob. And sports has always been a big part of my life. Now that maybe my knees aren't as good as they used to be, a little more spectating than playing. But I played everything when I was a kid. Anything. I mean, I was as competitive as you could get. And whether it was a pool table, a ping pong table, football, basketball, baseball, hockey. I played it all growing up in New York. But my best sport was tennis, So, probably at around 13, 14 years old, I committed 100% of my time on the tennis court and really pursued that, played in high school, and was, I guess, successful or lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to St. John's and play there in the Big East.
That's great. I mean, that's now. Did you have aspirations of being a professional athlete? And obviously, you said you went into it, but like when you were a kid, did you want to be a professional tennis player, baseball player? What was your what did you want to do?
Yeah, I guess when I was 7, 8 years old, I was all over the map. I wanted to be, Gail Sayers, and I wanted to be Franco Harris, and then Willie Mays, and I was going to say Derek Jeter, but it was actually Don Mattingly back then. So I went through it all. But yeah, then around 13, I played in this academy where I was training called Port Washington Tennis Academy. And all the players in the area, Vitas Gerulaitis, John McEnroe, they all trained there. And I would see them and I'd be like, oh man, yeah, I really wanted to be them. So it was a professional tennis player that I was really striving for from about 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, and I tell you, I always joke around. I say I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, the talent wasn't there, so I do podcasts now and do different things in the business world. So let's talk about fast forward into college. So one of the things, obviously, we talk about transitioning out of sports, and we talked a little bit offline about this. Give me your thoughts on schools having curriculum or workshops, not just a one day thing, but like where they can work with their current athletes and even their alumni athletes as well in teaching them a transition out of sports.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it's a great subject to discuss, Rob, because I feel it is tremendously underserved. It's just an underserved market. I didn't play a big time sport. So, from the college's standpoint, I played tennis, which
Right.
to me was everything, and it could lead to anything. But for the school, which was going into the Final Four and playing at Madison Square Garden for college basketball, that was their main focus. And the basketball players, look, most of them either went literally into the NBA or they went to play in Europe, and they continued their playing career. We had a lot of baseball players make it to the major leagues. But the tennis, the golf, the ancillary sports, it was really, here's your graduation paper. Best of luck, good luck. And there's more things available today, but it's still basically you're on your own. You graduate and maybe you want to stay with your sport. Maybe you want to get into the business world. And if you do want to get into the business world, it's more about using the characteristics that you learned on the court, on the field, as opposed to the schools taking the time, to mentor and tutor and advise the former athletes.
Yeah, and I think it's been the consensus. And I know schools are making strides to try, and every school is different. Obviously, some of the
Yep.
larger schools might have more resources, but it's
Right.
important. I mean, that's one of the things we've talked about is kind of bringing together. I always call it a SWAT team, but a team of mental health and financial advisors, career services, sales, like bringing together a curriculum that we could work with schools to help not only the current athletes, but I think more importantly, the alumni athletes that tend to get forgotten.
Yeah, and look, that's something that myself and my company, Vensure Employer Solutions, that's something that we're looking to get involved in. In other words, to work with the school, talk to all the athletes, about resume preparation, interviewing best practices, salary negotiating, and it's not just for the guys and gals coming right out of school. It could be for a former athlete who graduated 5 years ago. They went into a certain field. Maybe they want to make a career change. Maybe they want to go into a new industry or, find new employment. Yeah, definitely looking to help them.
Yeah, no, that's great, and we definitely that's something we all need to tap into. So now let's talk a little bit about networking, connecting. Talk about the importance of that, especially while you're still playing sports.
Well, so I am a huge proponent of networking. I mean, that's like my thing. After school, and if I would have known then what I know now, I feel my network would be even better. Since school, getting into business, LinkedIn has been a big part of my career. It just makes the world a lot smaller. I have 30,000 first connections, which is the maximum you're allowed. And the reason for that is I recruit. By the way, I'm a recruiter. I'm a professional, search consultant. And sometimes I need to find or speak to people in Iowa, Chicago, Indiana, places that I don't frequent. And platforms like LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or whatever your choice is, to connect with people, it just makes the world a lot smaller. But boy, if I could have networked with all my former tennis competitors,
Yeah,
uh, doubles partners, coaches, athletes from other teams, it would have been fantastic, because then I also would have had, that commonality with them, with the other athletes. And um, I just didn't know. No one told me, hey, you should always leave the door open. Don't burn a bridge. Shake hands. I didn't know that stuff. I was busy worried about my forehand and backhand.
yeah, and that's it's great advice because we say that too. I think even when you think back to like high school, like you're playing these sports, you've got your friends. You don't know what your friends' parents do, your coaches. There's so many people out there, and you just have to tap into,
Great
like Walter
point.
said. Yeah, I mean, networking, connecting is so important. Obviously, that's what we're about at Alumni Direct. But that's we're trying to facilitate that. And I talked to one agent. He said the best time to do it while they're still playing. And he said that's a lot of failure of these athletes is they'll go out and they'll play. And I understand they're like all into their sport, but then they're done, and then they're expecting to get all the stuff handed to them, and not necessarily so. So like if they had been talking to, like you just said, their teammates, their competitors back then, it would have been a whole different story.
Rob, I remember the men's tennis team. We used to play against the women's basketball team all the time in the gym. We'd play basketball with them. And we became good friends. And I didn't take a single phone number with me. I didn't take any business cards. And in your school, whether it's a big school or a small school, you develop these great relationships. And look, again, I just didn't have the skills and the wherewithal to make those lasting connections after school. And I certainly wish I did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the key ingredient there too is, like you said, the tapping into your fellow alumni, because it's so important.
Yeah.
You've got that affinity relationship. It's like I always tell people I went to University of Delaware, and if I meet a Delaware person here in South Florida, I'm like, they're great. How can I help you? I mean, they might be a jerk, but your initial impression, hey, we went to the same school, probably grew up in the same area, and then also like you, I was a runner in high school and college. And same thing with tennis. You don't get a lot of recognition, but when you start playing good, like you said, you're playing with the women's basketball team. I know with us, even back to high school, we kind of got looked down upon, but then we started winning a lot, and we started being, ultimately became not state champion, but like group champions and stuff like that. And it changed the perception of the football players and the baseball, soccer players, and all that.
Yeah, well, not for us. We had Chris Mullen and Mark Jackson and Bill
That's tough.
Wennington there. And these were, NBA players. So the tennis team was really just, we weren't looked down upon. We weren't looked up upon. We
Right.
just weren't looked at much. So, but that was fine. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, you were there. That's what's
Yeah.
most important. Now, did when you were there, did the school reach out to alumni to come back? Like whether it was tennis or the other sports, and not just for that like golf tournament, but did they reach out and have them come back to mentoring? And if not, then do you see any of that today?
Yeah. So our coach did that on his own. So I don't know if that counts, but our coach would bring back former players and even players on the tour, on the professional playing tour at that point, but really not in an organized way. Yeah, and the answer is yes. I do see more of that from schools, small schools, big schools. Certainly it seems to be more in the budget now for the big schools, not so much for the little guys. Still, I don't think. Look, everyone's busy.
Yeah.
The school has to make money, and they have lots, on their plate. I'm not saying the schools are doing anything bad on purpose, but I do hope and wish, and I'm going to try to be a part of the change, that the universities around the country, certainly the world, it's more of a global economy now, that they could get more involved with the alumni, and help them while they're in school to start to establish the roots, like you mentioned, for networking, for getting out into business, for thinking and starting to strategize what they want to do after school.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's definitely needed. I think people need to tap into that alumni network, and like you said, I think a lot of people, schools, like you said, they need to raise money. Sometimes the approach they come after alumni is more of a fundraising approach. I think it needs to be more of a friend raising approach, which we're trying to take, but it is real important. So now, this is something. It's like a new wrinkle to my show. I'm enjoying this too. So I'm going to ask you two questions, and it's not like who you want to have dinner with, but the first question is, what advice would you give to freshman Walter?
Oh God, wow. Serve and volley more. No, just kidding. I should have come up to net a little more. But what advice I would say? I probably would have said to stay in school a little longer. Maybe get my master's. Get into maybe law school. I enjoyed school, college. I didn't enjoy middle school too much, but by the time I got to college, I was enjoying learning about, just different facets of society, a lot in business and sales and, things like that. So I probably would have suggested to stay in school longer.
Okay, so like this could be part of that thing, but part two would be, what would you tell senior Walter?
Meaning when I
Like
was a kid?
what advice would you give to Walter his senior year of college?
In my senior year of college, right. Um, I probably would have told I would have told myself, take more phone numbers down, reach out and build lifelong or longer lasting relationships, especially from the guys and gals that I knew that were not in New York. Because I was in New York for a while after college. So some of them I would keep in touch with. We would meet up, and whether it was play a sport or just go out and enjoy each other's company. But the folks who left, and I had friends who went to Brazil and friends who went all over the rest of the country and the world. I would have loved to have kept in more touch with them, and like you said, established a network that I could tap into, forever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of it's that question ever, if you what is it, if you knew now what if you knew,
Which I
whatever
know,
you
yeah.
yeah. See, I can't even say it, so I guess I wouldn't have known it back
If
then.
I knew now what I would knew then, or if I knew then what I know now, right?
There you go. You got it. You got it. That's what it is. So let's talk about your transition out of sports. So I know like every sport has a different schedule with practice and the grind of just the full tilt dedication and everything you're doing along the way. So now when that's over, like talk a little bit about that next step. And I know you still try to get into professional level, but talk about that transition from college tennis into, I guess, a lot of people call it the real world.
Yeah. So after I realized that I couldn't make enough money to survive traveling expenses, on the professional circuit, I was like, right, I got to do something. I was always sales minded. So looking and thinking, what could I be good selling? I came up with tennis at the time and selling my services as a tennis professional. So to me, it was part sales and business and part tennis, certainly a passion that I had since 13 years old. So, graduating, I'm loving tennis for 10, 12 years. And that's where I started selling my services, building a tennis academy in New York on Long Island. It became very successful. Hundreds of, juniors, adults, and men, women, and, all across the gamut, doing private lessons, group lessons, whole families. And I really enjoyed it. And but there came a point where I wanted to get off the tennis court, and if I was going to be on a court, I wanted to play for enjoyment.
Right.
The teaching, the coaching, 75 hours a week was taking away from the enjoyment of the sport for me. So that's when I wanted to get into the boardroom, off the tennis court into the boardroom. And I focused on sales. That's what I did. And I sold a few different services. I sold real estate technology. I sold internet advertising. The services that I offered, I'm very proud of. Some not so much. People maybe didn't need those services, at the time. But it took a process of me figuring out, what I was good at or looking towards. And then that got me about 20 years ago, it got me into recruiting. Um, the people aspect, the sales aspect, the helping, which to be honest with you, Rob, I was very money motivated.
Yeah.
And I learned that recruiting can be very financially rewarding. And I was all into that, which was excellent. And I was told when I first got into recruiting, yeah, the money's good, but you're going to change people's lives. You're going to find people's jobs and careers at very bad moments in their lives. And I kind of shrugged it off, and I was like, yeah, okay, I guess that sounds fun and nice and, everything. Um, Now, looking back, yeah, I was an idiot because that has become probably my favorite part of the job. I learned a very valuable lesson. If you're passionate and persistent and good at something, the money will follow. You'll make money at whatever you're good at, whatever you enjoy. That will take care of itself. But to really change people's lives, I don't regret for 1 second getting into the recruiting space and helping people find jobs.
Yeah, no, that's great, and you found what you wanted to do, and I think sometimes you look at sports, and I guess some of the, like we said, whether it's some of the other sports like tennis and running and swimming and all that, uh, because there's not, I mean, there is professional tennis for sure, but with that road ahead of you, I think people start maybe planning out, and it sounds like you found your passion, and in retrospect, wish you might have found a little bit sooner on that, but give some advice, just several words of advice to athletes as they transition out of sports.
Sure. Well, I think part of my journey, Rob, could be helpful because I started off as a single recruiter on a desk, making phone calls, lots of phone calls, just reaching out to candidates. Um, and that was very useful. It was part of my journey. And my first piece of advice to the athletes is think back when you first started playing your sport. You probably sucked. You probably, maybe you had some God-given talent, but you weren't. You needed to learn, you needed to be coached, you needed to be mentored, and you needed to put in the 10,000 hours. And I did. I put in the 10,000 hours in tennis. I put in the 10,000 hours in recruiting. And I started on my desk. And, look, I'm very proud. I'm the chief talent officer, at Vensure, at a company that gives me the ability to travel around the world. We have 14,000 employees. And so I'm finding lots of people jobs literally within our organization, outside the company, for other organizations. So tennis literally was a career for me. It was, from my junior playing days to trying to be on the professional circuit to teaching and coaching. That was my first career. But then I had to transition into my next career. And it's difficult to look, at the end of the day, I was not John McEnroe,
Right.
but I was really good at tennis. I was an expert at tennis. And then I had to go all the way down and be as humble as possible and be bad at something and learn it from the ground up. And that's a lot of humility to swallow for someone who is an expert. So for any of the athletes, Rob, start over. If you have to, look, I had another good career selling my tennis services. So, that worked out for me and led me, I feel, to, where I had to go. But my biggest piece of advice, if you want to go from being a football player to a doctor, if you want to go from a basketball player to being a marketing specialist, just, make sure you're humble, ask a ton of questions, and learn from the experts, just like you did when you were a basketball or football player.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I think people get locked into, they identify themselves as the athlete or the sport and not the real person. I think that's important. I mean, you could be like, you're Walter the tennis player, Rob the runner, Susie the swimmer, or you're a person that has a lot of years ahead of you, which kind of leads to the next question, ultimately finding out more about Vensure. But talk about, from a recruiting perspective, and I've had conversations on other podcasts, the DNA of an athlete. Like, is that something companies are looking to hire? And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up, because that is very specifically, that's an initiative that I have heard from CEOs throughout my career. When I was a free agent recruiter, I didn't work for a company. I was a free agent. I worked with many thousands of companies, and I would work with the CEOs and speak to them on the phone and listen carefully. What are they looking for? Well, they're looking for coachability. They're looking for someone who can be a highly excelled person, but be part of a team. They're looking for discipline. They're looking for persistence. They're looking for diligence. So I started to put together the math, and it really equaled a lot, former athletes. And when I would bring up the suggestion, hey, would you look at an athlete coming out of college, almost 100% of the C-level folks were absolute yes, get me a former athlete. And it didn't matter, each type of sport brought different qualities. In other words, when I was on a tennis court, I had a great ability to separate my life from the court. I had a great ability to leave my problems at the door. And when I stepped on the tennis court, I became a whole different person. And that's very important in life, at work, whatever business, you get into, to leave your problems and issues, which we all have, at the door so you can excel in your career. Um, you know, it, I was in an individual sport, so it was just me. I was on a team, but on the court, I was having to make all the decisions by myself, the strategies, etc. Someone who's on a football team with 57 players, or a basketball team with 15 players, or a volleyball team with 18, people on the roster, it gives them, I feel, a strong leg up on maybe people who don't have that experience. Now, there's other ways to get that experience. It doesn't only have to be through sports, but whether you're a chess player, a bowling, part of the bowling team, I feel you walk into the business arena with a lot of skill sets that you may not have gotten if not for, on the playing field.
Yeah, and I implore, just based on what Walter just said. I mean, and I hear the same thoughts resonate from a lot of other business leaders. Is there's a lot of people that want to hire athletes. Not only they're enamored by the athletes and want to hear their stories and all that, but they have that skill set that Walter just talked about. And so everyone out there, just it's not over when you're done playing. Utilize your skill set. People want to work with you. They want to help you, and definitely do that. So let's kind of finish up on talk about Vensure and some of your initiatives, and ultimately how people can find you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. And I got to tell you, I'm very lucky that I'm surrounded by leaders who were either athletes themselves or coaches. We have some coaches, in our organization who really appreciate the athlete and the athlete's mind. For instance, my chief sales officer, he comes from Phil Urso. He comes from a football and lacrosse background and loves to find football players and lacrosse players for his sales organization, for our customer service, all across, the company. So I feel I'm of the same mindset when, speaking to candidates and speaking to former athletes. So, I find myself fortunate. But yeah, Rob, thanks. So Venture Employer Solutions, we are a nationwide HR outsourcing company, and we have lots of openings for athletes and non, for sure, all across, the United States and now the world. We operate in 17 countries. I think we have over 14,000 employees. I go to Latin America probably 25 times a year, recruiting, organizing, strategizing, with our team to find the best talent, for our organization as well as for our clients. Our headquarters are in Chandler, Arizona, and Duluth, Georgia. I'm based out of Hollywood, Florida. Rob, we probably have like 50, 55 offices around the country.
Wow.
I am the only Walter Sabrin on LinkedIn or on Facebook, so I'm easy to find. And I would always take a conversation, always. Yeah, I'm busy, I'm running around. I would say my hair's on fire a lot, but as you see, no more hair. But the fact is, if anyone, from you, Rob, from Alumni Direct, anyone wanted to have a conversation on what their next steps could be after school, after playing a sport, I'd be happy to help out. And my organization would be happy to talk to them about potentially joining us, as we are doing a lot of hiring, especially in Georgia and Arizona.
No, that's great. And people definitely need to tap into Vensure. Is it? It's how? What's the address, the URL?
Sure. So our website is Vensure, Vensure.com, Vensure.com. It's Vensure Employer, Solutions. We also, the other side of my shirt says Salvo, and Salvo Global is an organization that we run, we operate, and that's our international arm, where we find workers, Rob, abroad to work remotely to help our U.S. companies, U.S. clients. They do a great job, and they save a lot of money for our U.S. clients.
That's great. Now, people need to tap into that, and I've had looked into some of that as well, and I think it's important just to with the workspace and looking at companies like Vensure. It's obviously Walter's passion. We can see it in helping out athletes. So it's something that people definitely need to look into and keep us keep your chin up. I mean, it's like I said, there's a lot of issues out there, but there's a lot of help out there too from companies. Like Walter and Walter himself, and same thing with us at Alumni Direct. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. You can find us on X and Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. The show can be found on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel and across all the podcast networks. And I encourage people to watch or listen. It's just such a great program. We've had so many great athletes on there like Walter and just talking and sharing their stories. And it gives a lot of inspiration. So Walter, thank you so much. It was great having you today.
Oh, Rob, thank you again. Thanks for the platform. Thanks for the time. Happy holidays. Happy New Year to everybody.
Yep, it's been a true pleasure.